Welcome boys and girls, Costini here with a discussion about Kislev's new supporter system, inTotal Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires Patch 6.1. There have been quite a few changes made to the system in terms of how you gain supporters, what you use supporters for, and what kind of benefits you get from that. So let's start by talking about how you gain supporters. Principally, it is going to be from either fighting chaos or getting buildings that give you supporters. There's also a benefit that gives you supporters for battles against either Ice Court enemies, so Catherine, or Orthodoxy enemies, which is Castalton. There are some issues with regards to this for Catherine and Castalton. Suffice to say, right now, that I think both Boris Ursus and Astankia are far ahead in terms of gaining supporters compared to Catherine and Castalton. But I'll get to that in just a moment. So you gain 10 supporters for fighting against Chaos. You can gain 10 supporters for either Ice Court or Orthodoxy if you're fighting their enemies. And you get supporters from Atamans and buildings. With regards to Atamans, it's very clear cut with respect to that. Atamans have a skill choice that they acquire at level 5, so that's pretty early on. This gives them either 5 supporters with Ice Court or 5 supporters for the Orthodoxy. Then, with respect to buildings, you have either the Orthodoxy Shrine chain or the Courthouse chain. These are mutually exclusive buildings. They each start at 1 supporter for their respective factions, so either Ice Court or Orthodoxy, and then you can get up to 7 or 3 supporters at tier 3. You do lose some aspects of the building chain, so if you're getting the Orthodoxy Oubliette, you're losing that devotion benefit. If you're going with the ministerial housing, you do lose the 5% income from old buildings in a local province. And a bit of devotion, but you do gain other things. You get 1 hero capacity for Frost Maidens and 1 extra hero capacity for Patriarchs. You do already get 1 hero capacity for Patriarchs, but you can get up to 2. This is pretty ridiculous, I should point out, in terms of like Patriarch capacity, because to understand how many Patriarchs you can get, it's 49 that I can get over here. And I haven't even necessarily gone to the extreme lengths with regards to that building chain. But there's a lot of Patriarchs you can get with regards to that. A lot of Frost Maidens you can get with regards to that. Okay, so those are the principal ways of gaining supporters. Battles against Chaos, the buildings, a couple of character traits to be sure, Atamans. But yeah, principally battles against Chaos, battle against the enemies of the Ice Court and Orthodoxy, if those factions still exist. So as long as Catherine exists, and you haven't confederated her, or she hasn't been destroyed, and you're fighting her enemies, you can gain 10 supporters with her. If you're playing another faction. If Castalton still exists, the same thing for the Orthodoxy. The issue is when you're playing either Catherine or Castalton. So if you're playing Castalton, what ends up happening is you can get 10 supporters for battle against Chaos, but only for the Orthodoxy. Boris Ursus, Astankia have for both. If you're playing Castalton, it's only for the Orthodoxy. And you can only increase supporters with Ice Court through battles against their enemies, specifically their enemies. What I'm trying to say here is that Castalton and Catherine have a significant supporter downside compared to playing Astankia and Boris Ursus. In fact, I would dare say Astankia is probably the best with regards to supporters. There are some advantages Catherine and Castalton do have. Those you can also gain those advantages by confederating them. So specifically, they have Lord effects that give them a bit of supporters for their own side. Though it's pathetic, really. It's like 2 supporters for Castalton as the Patriarch. Considering an Ataman can give you 5 at level 5. But one of the more significant advantages is things like Orthodoxy in Action that can, or Firebrand that allows you to have a greater tier difference of supporters for the Orthodoxy compared to the Ice Court before penalties get kicked in. So the way the system works is every 100 supporters you get a different tier of support. This translates into a boon point that you can spend on supporters. But if you have a greater tier advantage, like let's say Ice Court is level 2 and Orthodoxy is level 1, then you're going to start getting some penalties. Just the way Harmony used to work for Cafe, because this is based on the Harmony system. You do it, and actually it's still based on the Harmony system. So if you're going one way or another too far, you will start getting penalties. The first penalty, though, is kind of hilarious because it actually starts with diplomatic relations negatives for the side that is disadvantaged. There are some ways to make up with that, but to be fair, in a campaign, even as Costalo and Catherine, you can manage balance. It's just nice to have because there are certain situations where you're going to end up in a disadvantage and you just don't want to pay the penalty cost. But you do have even like things like the Boca Palace, and I'm not sure about the Stankia, but Boris Ursus, this campaign that I played here, he has Khan King, which also allows him greater tier difference between of support for Orthodoxy. I suspect the Stankia is the best one to gain supporters, because if you're playing under any other campaign of Kislev, you're going to struggle to confederate her. Whereas if you're playing Stankia, you can confederate all the other Kislev Legendary Lords if you teleport back to Kislev. Or even if you don't, you can always go to Kislev later. Though that will certainly disadvantage you because you're not going to be fighting Chaos. But just kind of worth pointing out the dynamics over here with respect to that situation. There is a bug at the moment in this version. So the beta version I've been playing, the one that Creative Assembly gave me access to, there's a bit of a bug. If you go past 100 supporters on the intern, so if I click the intern button, what will happen is this bar will fill up. I will get that tier, I will get one boon, but then I will start the next turn with 0 supporters. That is not an especially great situation because you can clearly see that I am getting over 100 supporters, 135. So realistically, I should have far more supporters. Another downside I would say that exists to the system is that it's the kind of system that really heavily encourages you to play wide as opposed to tall. Whereas maybe the design intent of Kislev was like, let's design a system that's, oh, you can gain better supporters if you keep those factions alive and don't just confederate them. Yeah, but the reality of the situation is that, let's say you confederate Catherine, right? And you only gain one province. Well, one province with Catherine is 4 settlements. You can start doing the math, right? If you're getting ministerial housing, it's just worth it. Even with Castalton, it would be difficult to justify. And trying to herd the cats that are the AI into ensuring you're always at war with their enemies or they're at war with your enemies can be a bit of a frustrating experience. Okay, that said, let's look specifically at the early game and the kind of choices you have over there. On turn 5, you will have a choice between either neutrality, leaning towards Ice Court, or leaning towards Orthodoxy. This is a choice available in all the Kislev campaigns, including Catherine and Castalton. This will grant you different benefits. So you can either get one boon, not supporters, not tier, just boons, so the rewards over there. You can either get one boon for each or 2 for one faction of choice, as well as a benefit. So Ice Court support, gain 2 per turn, and Ice Court training cost minus 10% for 10 turns. Or you can go with support for the Orthodoxy, gain 2 Orthodoxy supporters per turn, 2 boons, as well as 1 devotion. I think generally speaking, going for the Orthodoxy over here, regardless of who you're playing, even Catherine, yes, even freaking Catherine, is generally going to be the better choice. Because you do get that devotion benefit translates into potentially using more invocations in your campaign, which is not a small thing in any way, shape, or form. Besides, there's also a fairly tangible benefit in going with the Orthodoxy very quickly in terms of the actual rewards. Speaking of the rewards, you do need 2 boons for the top rewards and then free, but this then gets changed to requiring more, so free or 4 boons for a certain benefit from the supporter tree. A final note on this subject is that if you are fighting difficult battles, or if you're fighting legendary lords, Chaos, Archeon, Azazel, you can actually gain more supporters through battles regardless of who you're playing as. So for instance, over here with Katrin, on her first 2 battles, I only gained 20 supporters through battle, but when in that Gestalten campaign I just showed off, I gained like 30 supporters defeating Azazel. Needs more testing, but essentially the tougher foes or Legendary Lord factions probably are going to reward you more supporters than minor factions, or at least defeating the Legendary Lord armies may award you more supporters. Not necessarily their factions, though possibly including their factions as well to take into consideration. Katrin and Gestalten do start with a number of supporters early on, just because of for their respective faction, but that's really the only substantial and tangible benefit that they have, that only they have. But there's a lot of drawbacks that they're also having to deal with in their campaign. So I think some things could have been better in this respect. Now, having spent all that time discussing on how to gain supporters and the various aspects about it, let's actually talk about the rewards. So as stated, the initial costs are 2, and for higher tiers, 3 boons. But then, once you get about 20 tiers of supporters, for both of them I think it will slow down. So you will get a Fickle Motherland faction effect, which does increase the costs of various rewards over here for both the upper tier and lower tiers over here. Or, yeah, lower tiers and higher tiers, regardless of how you want to view that. Now, I'm going to go over every single one of these effects, but I also do want to stress out which ones I think are actually the best rewards to go for early on. I think the Orthodoxy very early on in a campaign is much better than the Ice Court, because there's a bunch of benefits that the Orthodoxy does provide that you want, whereas there's only really 1, 2 at most benefits that you would really want early on with Ice Court. So for the Orthodoxy, you get Spirit of Community, so construction cost for infrastructure buildings. So these are your income buildings. You'll get them faster and cheaper. Or you can go for the Land Provides, which means all your resource buildings have no resource cost. Now, resource buildings typically are very cheap, but having them for free is going to net you a ridiculous amount of money, as I have gotten here in this campaign. Alternatively, if you want to traverse the campaign map faster, you can either get replenishing campaign movement range after winning a battle and experience when fighting chaos, or flat out 10% campaign movement range. Those are the benefits that I would say are the best for the Orthodoxy, and yes, you do have 4 benefits that each of them is pretty good early on. For with respect to the Ice Court, the one benefit you actually want to get is Ice Court Academia, because yes, you have research over here in the state that gives you Ice Witch Lord's capacity, and you do want to get at least Ice Sculpting for Frost Maiden capacity, because you only start with 1, but not being forced to spend your early research just to get Ice Witch Lord's recruitment is a fairly good benefit. Even if you're using the load save character system, and I would recommend doing so, but even if you're using that, I would dare argue that getting this very early on is a very nice benefit. Also, it would go into something like Bound of Season if you want to go for that for Mastery of Elemental Winds. But that's not the second one I'd recommend for Ice Court. I would recommend Treaty of War, because this gives you 30% campaign character experience gain for Lords and 200 experience per turn for Lords as well. That is a pretty substantial character experience benefit, and it helps increase the level of all of your Lords. Like, recruit a bunch of Lords very early on. In fact, if you want to abuse the load save character system, this one is probably the best one. But yeah, I would generally say like going for Orthodoxy's better campaign movement range, construction benefits, but and also more tangible benefits in the longer term. But all the same, the Ice Court does have its own benefits. But let's look at all of these rewards. From War to Tenets. Martial Doctrine provides you a benefit of melee defense and weapon strength for all units that are rank 7 or above. Then you can get Axe Bone Gun, which gives you Into the Fray Vigor benefit for hybrid Kislev infantry and cavalry units. So things like horse archers, Akshinas, ice guards. So just a benefit that makes them better in combat. So actually, Ice Guard, I think, are one of the units that can benefit a lot from these kind of research or these kind of supporter boons. I have no idea what happens if you get all of these upgrades. Just pointing it out, maybe some massive campaign benefit. No clue, because it takes a very long time, especially because of the fact that you cannot end the turn with more than one boon. That is a bit weird. Then you have Royal Guard in War. Upkeep benefit for Ice Guard and Tsar Guard, and then an armor piercing benefit for Ice Guard, which actually helps solve one of their very substantial issues, because their actual armor piercing is fairly lacking, and it's one of the reasons why Ice Guard are not really worth using. Then for the Orthodoxy, you have recruit rank for Cossars, as well as a replenishment at a low HP for anyone riding a bear. Can be a hero, can be a lord, can be units. Anyone riding a bear gets an HP, gets regeneration if they're lower than 25% HP. You also have Honor Guard, which gives you melee attack and defense in your own territory, and also Buyer Blood massive upgrade. So Buyer Blood really helps with keeping your units in fight, but this also improves them with unyielding assault, so they can't lose melee attack, and gives them 33% damage resistance. This is pretty crazy from a combat benefit, though. Kislev's military is very strong, so honestly, I think all of these kind of benefits that you're seeing over here are not really that important until much later on in the campaign, if you even ever get them. You then have Hierarchy, which gives you a Frost Maiden, hero capacity, as well as a 30% chance to grant an ancillary through hero actions. Not really my favorite thing, but can be worth it. Formal Warfare gives you that character experience gain that I mentioned, as well as an increased effect to rally, though, yeah, I admit this was fluff on my part. The rally effect is not necessarily so much, but the Treaty of War is very, very significant. Then you have War Priests, which gives you, in Patriarchs, which gives you flammable attacks and flaming attacks for Patriarchs. And all Lords gain access to Zealous Conscription, enabling access to instantly recruiting Cossars. And it is it is just like Kislevite warriors, Cossars with spears, and regular Cossars. It goes up to 4 capacity that you can recruit. And it just increases, you can get up to 4. It does take a couple of turns cooldown to get all of it, to get back. But it does give you global recruitment of instant Cossars across your empire. Then you have Lead by Example, which are some Lord benefits, but basically it gives you a melee attack and leadership benefit in 35 meters for Boyars, Rosina, Adamans, and Boris Ursus. Apparently he counts as a Boyar, I suppose. Then you have Battlefield Indemnity, which gives you base weapon damage and armor-piercing weapon damage that stacks with each kill, and this is available to every Lord. We move on to Dominion. This gives you a minus 10% upkeep when in your own territory, as well as 100 unit experience per turn when in your own territory with standing forces. So it's a strong defensive benefit if you're going to play like that. You then get Noble Administrators, 30 diplomatic relations with Kislev, and 1 devotion. It's useful to help you with Confederation. One of the reasons Café does Confederations for regular diplomacy so well is they have a lot of diplomatic benefits. This is what will help you out if you're playing Kislev. Then you have Ancient Dues, chance to gain a magic item 25% per turn, and research rate +1 for each settlement. Yeah, Kislev is certainly going to benefit on research if they build a massive empire. Then you have foundations, so the infrastructure cost and construction time. Then Unity in Toil at the higher tier. Every owned settlement provides a 1% income and 5 growth to all adjacent settlements. Then you have Groundbreakers. Resource buildings have no cost. And also Spiritual Conquest. So this is interesting. This gives you a population surplus +1 for newly captured settlements and +100 devotion for settlements in chaotic wasteland climate. This is an enormous benefit, in particular for Boris Ursus, who also, I should add, who also, I should add, does have some fairly crazy benefits over here, including Great Reclaimer, which grants you 2 population surplus in newly captured settlements. Yes, if you're conquering territory with Borsers in the Cast Wasteland, then you're looking at 3 population surplus points for each of them. I'm not gonna lie, that is pretty crazy. Then we have Legacy. This gives you allegiance points and diplomatic relations with the Empire. Allegiance points with Empire, and diplomatic relations with Empire and Dwarves, actually. So this allows you to get artillery from the Dwarves or gyrocopters much easier. Because of alliances and all that. Then you have foreign policy, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. So it gives you 20 diplomatic relations with all factions, reload time reduction, melee attack and melee defense for units recruited allied recruitment. What is interesting about this is that it apparently considers Gotrek, Felix, and Ulrika as being foreign units. Well, it makes sense. So the most powerful version of Gotrek and Felix? I don't know. Maybe so. Like, you look at Felix and Gotrek over here, they are looking at over 100 melee attack. Yeah, that's pretty nuts when you're thinking about it. That situation. That's negotiation. You then have Grand Spellcraft, which starts out with a very strong 6,000 defensive supply benefit. So, and Siege is... But it's not really great. Like, Grand Spellcraft is a really weird name because it gives you, like, defensive benefits, so defensive supplies, and then campaign line of sight 100%. That's pretty useful. And all enemies are permanently revealed in battle when in your own territory. So defensive benefits, it's just gimmicky. I'm not gonna lie. Then you have Old Foes, so 10% campaign movement range when winning a battle, and 100% experience when fighting against forces of chaos, as well as the Thunderstorm, Force and Thunderstorm ability when fighting against forces of chaos. Kislev has a lot of reasons to fight chaos, be it supporters or the kind of benefits you're gaining over here through some of the boons. Then you have Expedition, which gives you 10% campaign movement range, as well as 1 unit recruit rank for all units after colonizing a ruin, and newly colonized ruins have greatly reduced construction costs and duration for 1 turn. So you can basically take a recently ruined settlement and just make it a proper capital in a single turn. And keep in mind the population surplus benefits that you can get as well. Then you have tenets. So this gives you practice, spell intensity 20% for Ice Court, and then wins a magic cost for common Lore of Ice and Lord of Tempest spells. Then you have Fury, which unlocks a slot for Ice Court and Ice Court Frost Maidens and Ice Witch Lords, as well as reducing the cost by 20%. And then Bond of Seasons, which gives you mastery of elemental winds for Frost Maidens, Ice Witches, and Katrin. Though it should be pointed out, Katrin is still actually the worst spellcaster in Kislev. I'm not joking. Like, a generic mage is still better, a generic hero is better, a generic lord is better, and yeah, Ostankia and a hag witch is better. Like, Katrin is really pathetic in a lot of ways. It's worth using her nowadays, but yeah, still. Then you have Battle Prayers. So effect duration 50% for Kislev Battle Prayers, and crucially 100% range, so more units will be affected by those Battle Prayers. Then you get Tor Battle Hymn for Borisursis, Boyars, Atamans, and Druzina Lords. Yeah, which gives you the melee attack and a radius. Pretty nice, all things considered. And then Ritualized Worship in Cathedrals, minus 25% construction cost for buildings that re-support for the Great Orthodoxy or Ice Court. So I'm guessing, if we're considering this, I'm guessing that even though it says infrastructure building, it's not counting those as being part of infrastructure, they're counting their own thing. Then you have Worthy Offerings, so Orthodoxy churches outside of Erengrad, Kislev, and Prague also produce growth, and gives you 15 growth in all provinces. Yeah, Kislev has some really, really crazy benefits. I've made my point very clear on what I think the benefits are. The early game benefits are worth it more. I think going for the Orthodoxy, you do want to balance it out. You don't want to get into I think you lose devotion, but I'm not entirely certain. You certainly don't want to lose. You don't want to go into a full-on negative. But yeah, I think the Orthodoxy just provides far better benefits than the Ice Court in ways that matter. Though, don't get me wrong, the Ice Court with its upkeep benefits, character experience benefits, diplomacy benefits are not insubstantial either. But it's more of a situation where those things become really useful far later on, whereas early on you're really encouraged to go for the Orthodoxy. That's all I had to say. Hope you all enjoyed this. Pretty powerful system, much better system than what we had before. I do think Catra and Castalton got the short end of the stick with it, so hopefully some fixes will be coming with regards to that, but yeah, substantially better than what we had before. Christine signing out.